Okay, folks. This is Tragedy and Hope, Part 9, the analysis portion. And in this section, it's going to be kind of deep and complex. So I hope I can explain this well. That's why I put up more than the usual number of charts and slides so that maybe, we can explain this complex portion because even Quigley said this is, each portion that we're doing could be a book in itself. It's in a lot of this is maybe outside the scope of the book that he was writing. So we're going to attempt to get through this, and hopefully, it can bring some clarity to the text and maybe inspire some questions. Okay, we're going to the economic portion. What makes up an economy? They said there's 4 aspects of an economy. You got to have energy to transform the materials that you have, and hopefully this, you don't want it to be random, especially in an economy. An economy it has to be organized so it can be efficient, and then there has to be some kind of control, to decide who gets what and who makes what. I've researched. There's a lot of material about this, so. Each portion can be almost a book by itself. So we're going into the next slide. We're going to start with the energy portion. Okay, he gives this is a table of the evolution of or the development of energy as far as an economy goes. Okay, before 1000 AD, the main source of energy in an economy, or that does work in an economy, was organic, and it was done with manpower, with serfs, with slaves, with people working the land. Sometimes you could have some wind power or something like that where people manipulate, wind and maybe even rain. But before that, the main source of energy was manpower. Okay, after 1000 AD, they began to use animals, because as you grew more food, you could raise and domesticate more animals. So then you could use dogs, you could use oxen, you could use cows, horses, whatever. You domesticate animals, and the animals are stronger, so they can do more work. Okay, after the Industrial Revolution, once you had this going and you had excess people to do research, the Industrial Revolution, you discovered that you could use and mine fossil fuels like coal and use them in steam engines, and that really helped the modern Western culture or Western civilization develop. The whole world developed. That was a revolution in itself. This basically was the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution really took off when you no longer needed manpower, which was very limited, and animals, which were limited. You could use something way more powerful. And then it really got a boost when they learned to use petroleum. When the oil-based fossil fuels, which the world still basically runs on right now. The Saudi Arabia, Iran, all those wars are over this, because we have literally become an energy society. Okay, then he goes into the second segment. This is a table of the second segment, materials. And briefly, the Iron Age started, in Africa way back in the BC, and for 2,000 years, maybe even more. The men forged iron, and iron was the basic, well, not the basic, but is the premium building material. That's what you forge your weapons with. That's what you reinforce your buildings with. This was the strongest material out there. So when they learned to forge iron, that was a transformational material. When they manipulated iron and turned it into steel, because they had the coke furnaces and the different type of energy, it wasn't man-made or animal. That's when you had another revolution. Your industrial revolution was forged on steel. And you got your railroads, you got your transmission wires, you got your steel boats that you could transport people and goods with, your automobiles and whatnot. And then shortly thereafter, it got more refined, and you got into your alloys and your light metals. And then, and with the petroleum revolution, you got into synthetics. Your tires, your clothing, instead of silk, you got your rayons and your synthetic fibers and whatnot. So those are your 4 different ages of materials, according to Mr. Quigley. The 6 stages of economic organization, and the first part of it was the first stage of economic organization, what he calls the manorial or the feudal system. And the feudal systems go back as far as mankind goes back. When it organized itself into civilizations or into empires, or a set of feudal lords, or where you have a king, or you have a lord, or you have a landowners. The feudal system goes way back. But if, for the purposes of this discussion, Western civilization's feudal system started after it reorganized itself after the fall of the classical or the Roman civilization. And when it reorganized itself and actually got itself set up, it was in the date of 670, as he quickly puts it. And it was custom. The management was custom to wherever you were. The laws and the management was custom to the feudal lords or the king, or wherever that land happened to be. And the profits or the excess came from it being stable. Once the labor was organized, there was a stability to it, there was a sameness to it, there was a custom to it, and it didn't venture far outside of its borders. So wherever you went, you had to deal with the laws and the customs of that land. Thereafter, all other, let's quickly puts it, all other, after this, it becomes capitalism. And capitalism is nothing more than the system of pursuit of profits within a price system, as he puts it, as his definition says. And the first one was, as he puts it, in 1050 was commercial capitalism, which is trading cartels, which was mercantilism, as he put it, municipal mercantilism, where, as he says, traders found out that their goods were worth more elsewhere where those goods could not be had, and vice versa. So they basically, made profits from the exchange of goods from one place to another. So you get food or spices from China, and you bring it into Europe, at a premium. It can be sold, and vice versa. Animal skins or wine or whatever that's going the other way could be sold because there's a lack of it. They're exotic in another place, so people are willing to pay more for that, and the commercial capitalists made money off of that. The second part of the commercial capitalism was basically the charter companies, which was in several stages. The last of which were the Indian company or the Bay Colony companies, where it was formalized, where it had a state charter. The first one was independent, more or less, was wherever you were, but this was organized, where you actually had state chartered companies that not only carried goods and services, but also took control of colonies, by force. America, the United States was once a It was a mercantilist state, was a colony that was controlled by mercantilism. The East India Tea Company, which George Washington worked for as a surveyor. They went all over, and they basically shipped mercantilism around the world. Okay, after that, after that, you get industrial capitalism, and this is where the profits from the mercantilists come back and produce those four revolutions. Now, this is from 770, the agricultural, the industrial, all those revolutions produce industrial capitalism, and that freed the independent owners to make money from the manufacture of goods. And this, in turn, led into what they call financial capitalism, which is basically the manipulation of money. Once you have goods and you have bankers and you have profits, those profits have to go somewhere, and that turns into money. And so now you can start making money from money, because other places need to start their own industries and their own companies, and they need capital, or they need money to start that. And the bankers, the banking cartels, charge interest, and they made money from not only the interest but also pieces of that particular company. So they made money. They made money from the manipulation of money. Okay, the second to the last stage of economic organization was the bigger cartels, the big national cartels. We still see it today. We call them corporations. That the big international firms that that are run by managers. We see this a lot. CEOs, COOs, and they deal with the manipulations of markets. Apple comes to mind. Nike comes to mind, where they manipulate the market by going into a country and acquiring low wages and low prices for raw materials, and taking that back to a higher price system, much like the mercantilists did, to a higher priced civilization, and they make tons and tons of loot from that arbitration. And that even led into the evolution of what he calls a pluralist economy, where the technocrats and the lobbyists actually control countries. Much the way the corporations and the technocrats now control our Congress, where they actually not only control markets, but they actually control countries. They control blocks of markets. You can think about the mining cartels that we see. You can think about the electronic cartels that we see. These huge conglomerates that actually manipulate the economies of not just countries, but whole blocks of countries, whole blocks of markets. So those are what I call the 6 stages of economic organization. And he's going to go deeper into this later. This is, like I said, sometimes Quigley touches on things, but they can become books themselves. Each one of these sections are basically books, and he's trying to condense this to something that's understandable.